Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Midwest Mythos. And guess what, guys? We're back on the interviews. I know last week I did a little deep dive on the national parks, just two of them. Hopefully you guys like that because we got 61 more of them in the U.S. and I'll probably get into the ones all across the world too, because I just found out they got national parks across the world. But thank you guys for listening. We're about to hit that 2,000 listener mark. I appreciate each and every one of y'all and all that you do. And if anybody listening to this or has a friend that does not listen to the show, let them know. And maybe you guys can come on and be a guest on the show like tonight's awesome guest. How's it going?
Hello, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Good, thank you for having me.
Anytime. Thanks for reaching out. So, yeah, just like they did, reached out. Guess what? They're a guest on the show.
It's
So,
that easy, folks.
it's that easy. What? We sent a couple text messages back and forth on Instagram, and boom, we're here.
Yep, no tornado can stop us this time.
No, yeah. So last we were supposed to record last week, and a tornado touched down 2 towns over from me. So my wife was like, "Hey, you probably shouldn't record tonight." And I'm like, "Why?" She's like, "Don't you hear all the sirens blaring? Tornado touchdown too." I was like, "Oh no." So I texted, "Yeah, we got to reschedule." But
Yeah, casually getting a message saying, hey, you can't record tonight, there's a tornado outside. It's
that's
like, alright, have fun, be safe.
that's the Midwest. Oh, so how about you let everybody know your name, what it is that you do, and why you're here this evening?
Yeah, my name is Jason, and I am the guy who does Spooky CLT, mostly on Instagram. And for those who do not know, CLT is an abbreviation for Charlotte, North Carolina. It is our airplane code, like our airport code, if you've ever flown here, and us people in Charlotte have taken a liking to it. We put it on hats, shirts. Um, yeah, so my job, my responsibility is to be the spooky spokesperson of Charlotte. Try to get everyone up to speed with our history, our folklore, our ghost stories, cryptid stories, anything that makes Charlotte an interesting or a spooky place. I want to make sure it's out there for people to learn about. I've been doing the account now for, gosh, it's probably been 8 years. Um, Post all the time. I'm not from Charlotte. I actually moved there post college. But I've planted my roots here. Found my wife, had a kid. Um, if anyone lives in Charlotte, you know that the everyone is a transplant. To the point where people call people who have actually been born here unicorns because it's just so hard to find them. Um, yeah, and I told you before, Charlotte gets a bad rap because so many people are transplants. They move to a new city, and it doesn't really have that cultural identity that's in your face like New Orleans or Savannah or Charleston or those bigger cities. So people move in and they're like, well, what's the deal here? And if all you're doing is going to breweries and bars, you're not really going to learn it. So I've taken it upon myself to learn the history and try to get it out there and the only way I know how, which is via ghost stories and spooky stuff. Um, so if you were to look at my Instagram, Spooky CLT, I post like every other day. So stick around for a while and you will become an expert in all things Charlotte sooner or later.
I can vouch for that page, his page that he got going on. A lot of good stuff on there. When he commented on that post, I went through and I was just looking through everything because I'd been following you for a minute. I was like, hey, let me go through everything. I was like, oh, there's a lot of good stuff here that I've never seen before, and it makes sense that there's actually. I know you said people don't really realize the history and stuff there, but being it like right almost by right, well, on an East Coast state, that's where the country began. There's all kinds of stuff, and most of the time it's
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, so my wife and I, we used to do a North Carolina podcast for history, and it's, I started making the joke that all roads lead back to North Carolina one way or the other. We're involved with everything when it comes to history. So when I get the spiel about why Charlotte does have history and culture, it goes back further than the start of the country. Um, and we were I mean, before us Americans, there was the Catawba tribe, and I know that they were here, and I love making sure that people know about them. But I have so much to learn about it that I don't even want to say anything stupid. So we had the Catawba tribe, and then settlers came in, via Jamestown, via um, all the European settlements. And the reason why Charlotte was so special is it was actually along two trading routes, one which was north to south, and the other which was east to west. And Charlotte was smack dab in the center. And if you were to go up, north, it would bring you all the way to Pennsylvania. Down, it would bring you pretty much to Florida. East, it would bring you to the beach. West, it would bring you to the mountains. Um, so that's why Charlotte was such an important place, and that's why the settlers that came here set up shop there. What also makes Charlotte important, and it dates us as important as the country, is we here in Charlotte, we strongly believe that we actually wrote the precursor to the Declaration of Independence. It was called the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence, MECDEC for short. We celebrate it on May 20th. It is on our state flag. The story goes is that a bunch of the white rich people in town, they had their government gathering, and they were like, things aren't looking good. We're catching winds that we're going to be taxed more than we like. I think it's time to cut roots. So they all got drunk one night, wrote it up, Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. They paid this guy, his name was Captain James Jack. There's now a beer named after him. And he was like our Southern Paul Revere. He took the mech deck and he rode it up by horse all the way to Philadelphia. Um, and during that time, if he was caught with that, he would have been hanged for sure for treason. But he made it all the way to Philadelphia, and as story goes, is he presented it in front of Congress, and they were like, "Whoa, easy, easy. We're not ready to do this as a country." But Thomas Jefferson took a look at it, and then, May 20th, 1775, just about a year later, they have the Declaration of Independence. And a few years later, John Adams actually wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson, and he was like, "Hey, I just got made aware of this mech deck. I'm reading over it, and there are a lot of similarities between the mech deck and the Jeff deck, is what we call it, the Jefferson Declaration." Um, yeah, so even John Adams thinks that Thomas Jefferson plagiarized off of us. Uh, so we were here at the start of the country. The reason that we're named Charlotte is because we were actually trying to gain favor with the Queen ahead of the war. So we were like, hey, King George, your wife Charlotte of Mecklenburg Schweitz, Germany, if you give us enough money for us to build a decent courthouse, we will name our city after her. And we did. And now we are called the Queen City because here we are still named after the Queen. And like I said, it was like 2 years later, we were like, actually, we want out. We want to be our own thing.
Oh, that's
So Charlotte has a lot of historic roots. There were Revolutionary War battles. There was one in our city center. To the point where like the 26th floor skyscraper that I work in now is right across the street from what was a British encampment and a mass grave, and now there is a Wells Fargo building built on top of it. We have this crazy story of, it's called the Battle of the Bees, where General Cornwallis, if you're a history guy, you know that he was a bigwig in the Revolutionary War. He came into town during that battle, and when they took over Charlotte for a few months, and when they were here, they ran out of supplies, so they started raiding surrounding farms of Charlotte, and they came across McIntyre Farm, which is actually on my way home from work, and it was like 300 redcoats rolling deep. They come across this farm. One of them steps on a underground bee's nest, and bees start swarming. So they were being stalked by about 13 colonists, and the colonists see like this mass hysteria, redcoats starting scattering, breaking ranks. They open fire. They start picking them off one by one. The redcoats, not understanding like why there's the hysteria, they retreat. So a dozen soon-to-be Americans defeated 300 plus redcoats with the help of some bees. Um, and funny enough, that story, became folklore, and it actually was the precursor to why our NBA basketball team is called the Charlotte Hornets. So, yep, Cornwallis made a comment about how he felt so unwelcome in Charlotte because how nasty people were to him. He said that it was like living in a hornet's nest. So, so now we have the Charlotte Hornets NBA team owned by Michael Jordan. And if you were to see a cop car in Charlotte or a historic landmark, it would have a hornet's nest um, engraved on the side of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I never
And
knew that.
yeah, no, that's Charlotte for you. And then moving beyond that, we're a hot spot for bootlegging during Prohibition. That was really popular. In my research, one of my favorite stories is a bunch of townspeople were coming to the government saying, like, hey, we really need clearing out this road. Can you help us? And the police were like, there shouldn't be anyone driving on that road. Why do you need it paved? So they go out and inspect it, and they start looking around, and they find a distillery. And and the townspeople wanted that road paved because they were making so many trips to this farm that was giving out moonshine. That's how the police caught him, is because people wanted easier access to it, that they actually try to ask for help. Um, and then also, like, continuing on that is because moonshine and bootleg liquor was such a popular industry during that time, um, it became a good like gig to get to run shine, and people had to start souping up their cars to be able to, one, handle off-roading, and then two, outrun the cops. And then you got a bunch of these guys who have souped up cars, and then alcohol becomes legal, and they're like, well, shit, we still want to race these things, so they start driving around in circles. Boom, created NASCAR. That is legitimately where NASCAR got its start, is from shine runners who still wanted to race their cars that they made to be faster than the cops.
Wow. That
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff I've noticed while just doing some research on stuff in my area of the country that really came out of Prohibition. Like,
What is it? Desperation. Or breeds creativity or whatever.
yeah. Uh, well, Walt Disney, his idea for the little trains, that came out of something uh, where I'm from during the Prohibition, because they were a family attraction, but I believe they were also using the tiny trains to move booze too. So he was like, "Hey, I like this design. I'm gonna put this in my amusement park."
There you go.
So it's wild,
Uh,
man.
yeah. One other thing that I always try to make sure that people know is the first gold rush in the country was actually in it was in not in Charlotte proper. At the time, it was part of the county. Now it's not. But it sparked the gold rush that was in Charlotte. So prior to the California gold rush, a 14-year-old kid in Charlotte named Conrad Reed was bow fishing at a creek on his farm, and came across this like beautiful, he didn't know it at the time, but it was like a 14-pound gold nugget. And his family used it as a doorstop for 2 years. And then eventually his dad lost his job. They were looking to sell stuff. They brought that rock to Fayetteville, um, to a market there. The guy who they sold it to was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I'll give you a few bucks for it," not telling him that it was a gold nugget. Then the guy starts bragging about it to everyone in town, saying, "Look at this! Like, look what I schemed." So Conrad's dad came back with guns and was like, "Give me what it's worth, or or I found someone who will." So then it was over $1,000, which at that time, changed your life.
Yeah.
Um, but then that sparked a gold rush. There's actually over 50 abandoned gold mines in the Charlotte area. Um, and because of that, it led to a mint being created in Charlotte. So it was printing press like money. And now, 200 plus years later, we have some of the largest, we're like number two in banking next to New York. Like, if there was another 9/11, all of the banks would come and operate out of Charlotte. And it's because of Conrad Reed did some bow fishing and found the gold nugget.
That's insane. People don't. I'm so glad you're doing stuff like this and bringing this information because this is not an uncommon thing, especially in America. These little tiny things that seem almost like nothing end up being these turning into all these massive, massive things 200 years,
Well,
250
so
years
I'll
later.
say that it's not like I'm uncovering the stuff. I'm reading the stuff that was already written.
Exactly.
I'll say for our generation, we gotta step up and learn this stuff because like I'm super involved now with the like local history stuff. Like I'm on a committee or I'm on a historian subcommittee for a cemetery. I'm on a board for a cemetery. I work with the Charlotte Landmarks Commission doing events all the time. I'm one of two certified tour guides for cemeteries in Charlotte. And like whenever I go to these meetings and these and all this stuff, I'm in my 30s and I'm the youngest person there by like 30 years. It's the olds right now, like the olds who are really holding on to it. And if we don't step in and take over, we're gonna lose. We're gonna lose all this stuff. And Charlotte is riddled with all of these great historic landmark signs in your face saying this important thing happens here. And then I'll talk to someone who's lived here all of their life, 40 plus years, and they're like, what do you mean that Charlotte's named after the queen? And I'm like, man, like this is the easy shit. Um, so that's why it's important, And I'll say I started this page as ghost stories, because I love ghost stories. But it quickly turns into, man, it is important that people know this stuff. So if I can tell people on social media, which is I think the space that the old historian people are missing, um, then I can put it in front of people who wouldn't see it otherwise. And I've got over 20,000 followers now, so hopefully they're learning something.
Yeah.
If they walk away learning one thing, then I've done my job.
Oh yeah. That's the same way I feel about doing this podcast. Is if each week I can teach somebody or something new that they don't know, and they can take it and share it with somebody else, I'm doing something right. I don't care if it's
Yep.
just one person, because ever since I was little, I mean, I talked about it in my intro. I was interested in like ancient history, cryptids, all this kind of stuff, folklore. And so when I was in high school 6, 7 years ago, I volunteered at we have a our county historical museum. I actually did an internship there,
Hmm.
learned all this stuff about my town that I grew up in. Found out, oh yeah, it's actually supposed to be a copycat town out of this place out of California. All the miners came after the gold rush kind of drove up, dried up, did all the stuff here. The Al Capone got involved, and I was like, man, I wouldn't have learned this anywhere else. And all these
Yep.
historical these because most of the people there, they're probably in their 80s now.
Yeah.
But they're like, hey, at least somebody has an interest in this kind of stuff, so we know this will be passed on. And I was like, yeah, that's all I want to do. Like,
Yep.
if I could, some people can do it. If I could support my family, being a historian at a museum or something like that,
Preach.
I would in a heartbeat. But let's be realistic. Unless we're living in like Chicago or New York that have these massive massive museums, and we
Yeah.
got a doctorate with 30 plus years in the field, we ain't gonna be able to make that happen then.
Yeah, I hear that.
But we can do stuff like this, and who knows, maybe we're making an even bigger impact.
Yeah. Well, so on that note, I'm Spooky CLT. I'd love to tell you some ghost stories
Let's get
of
into it.
the area. So the first one that I always try to make sure that gets it put across, that I want everyone to know, is the ghost of the Dunhill Hotel. Number one, because if you're going to be a haunted city, you got to have a haunted hotel. You got to have somewhere for people to visit when they're coming into town. And then number two, the Dunhill Hotel is just about 100 years old, still standing in Uptown Charlotte, which is our version of downtown. We call it Uptown because it's the highest point of the city. Um, and so whenever people are like, "Oh, Charlotte bulldozes its old buildings," I'm like, "All right, but the haunted Dunhill Hotel is 100 years old, still standing. What now?" So Dunhill Hotel started off as Mayfair Manor. It was being built in the 1920s, opened up early 1930s, which coincided with the Great Depression. And like I said, Charlotte has always been a banking city. So the hotel itself is 10 stories tall, and at the time, it was the tallest building that the public could access. So, um, times are tough. A lot of the bankers would lose all their money and then spend their last dime at the hotel, request a room on the top floor, and then take the fast way down to ease their troubles. Um, and this became a reoccurring event all the way up until the 90s. It was a common occurrence. Now, I actually do have a history working in hotels, and unfortunately, people do die in those a lot more than you think they do.
Oh yeah.
But in this case, there was a big story. And if you were to go to the Dunhill Hotel today, talk to the staff, talk to the bartenders, your waiters at the restaurant, they would tell you all of their paranormal experiences. Everything ranging from one woman told me about how she was working the desk at night. She was there by herself. Um, the, the third shift person hadn't come in yet, and she went out to have a cigarette. She knew that occupancy was low, no one was really waiting for her. She was outside, and she heard a high pitched, what she described as a witch cackle, coming in from the inside. She went in, couldn't find a single person. Another person told me about how in their banquet hall they saw a woman with long, dark hair walking in a white dress, and when they approached her, disappeared. I had two friends actually investigate the hotel. They stayed overnight and they got permission to go about the banquet space. And there was this tinted glass door, and they got it on their Facebook Live, but you can see something behind the door. They open it up, nothing there. About 20 seconds before that, they didn't realize it at the time, but you could hear it on the audio. Someone says hello, straight up, like hello, on it. So they caught that. Now, the number one haunted room, because if you're a haunted hotel, you have to have the haunted room, is 906. The story that was told to me by the staff is that a woman was staying in room 906 overnight, had no idea about the history of the building, and she called down to the front desk in a panic, saying she just saw someone out her window fall. So she was looking out her window. It looked like someone had dropped. She looked outside, couldn't see anyone, was wondering why the cops hadn't showed up, went down to the desk saying, "What are you guys going to do about this?" Nothing happened. Goes back up to her room, sees the same thing again. Goes back down, and that's when the hotel told her, they're like, "Hey, lady, this place has a history of people jumping. It's possible that you saw something that wasn't actually there." Um, the sad part of that is though is I actually found a an article of in the Charlotte Observer, which is our paper, an article from the gosh, must have been the late 70s. Because it wasn't the Dunhill Hotel yet, but it was the story of a woman who was staying in 906 and she did leap out the window. Um, the sad part is that I posted this article and it was like the headline of the news. There was a picture of the cops standing around, and then someone covered by a sheet on the ground, and a woman who claimed to be the niece of that person said that, hey, that was my aunt. She did have a history of mental illness. I've actually visited the hotel to stay in room 906 to feel closer to her. Um, and that's when I told her, I was like, all right, well, I will not be posting that picture anymore. I apologize. Um, but also, thank you for confirming that, like, that this did happen and it did happen in the room. Um, it was a wake up call that these ghost stories that we're telling are real people who were alive at one point. It was a reminder of that. So my wife and I, we did stay at the hotel. We did stay there after our wedding anniversary, so 5 years ago at this point, our wedding 5 years ago, and we got too drunk because we were celebrating.
Of
And the
course.
staff was very friendly, and they told us a lot of stories and showed us a lot of places. But when it came to being after hours, we were too drunk to care about ghost hunting. So we've gone back. We've drank at the bar, ate at the restaurant. I go there for lunch a lot because I actually work a few doors down. So I keep an eye on it, and the staff know me, and if anything happens, they'll tell me. Um, but we haven't stayed overnight in a while, so I haven't had anything specific happen to me there, unfortunately. Now, the crazy part is, I didn't even mention this. Part of the reason why everyone knows it as the haunted hotel is because when it was under construction, it's passed through like hands of ownership a number of time over the past 100 years. In the 80s, it was actually abandoned. The owner shut down shop and then waited 10 years before selling it to the next person who did like a multi-million-dollar renovation. And when they were doing that, they actually found a skeleton at the bottom of the elevator shaft. So, person was decomposed. They had been there for years. Um, so the story, like people were always saying, oh, it must have been like a homeless person that was taking shelter, or something happened, dropped in the bottom of the elevator shaft. Um, and that was the story. So whenever people were having like these poltergeist activity happen to them, they're like, "Oh, that's Dusty, the Dunhill ghost," thinking that it was the skeleton, the spirit of the person who died there. Forensics did show that it was a male, um, and they were thinking that he was had a like a limp because of his bone structure as well as some type of wrist abnormality. And like that was the story. The crazy part is that in 2023, I found a police report because the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department actually got access to a new database of DNA, and they were running cold cases against it, and they ran the DNA from the bones that they found in the 80s from the hotel, and they got a hit. Um, they found someone that was related to, like, they had the similar DNA. They lived in Mooresville, and they connected the skeleton to a missing person from the late 70s. His name was Odell Mundy. They called him Doc. He was a World War II vet. He was actually the manager at a department store that was 2 blocks over, but he did fall on hard times, and he was known for like living on the streets. So he was homeless, but he did have a job. So he must have been camping out in the Dunhill, and who knows what happens at this point. But they found him at the bottom of the elevator shaft, and now after it was 30 plus years of not knowing who this skeleton belonged to, they finally figured it out, which was super exciting. And it was just like awesome that this historic ghost story that I've been telling for years got an update. Like, how many times has that happened?
It, I can maybe name two. I think of two. That's awesome though. That's another importance of like keeping these stories, especially it seems to be like the paranormal, these ghost stories. 'Cause the technology we got now, man, is so
Right.
crazy that stuff like this can happen quite
Yeah,
often.
absolutely. So I have another haunted location for you, and if this is striking your fancy, last October I did a series of posts. I did 13 Ghosts of Charlotte over the course of October, where I didn't do like deep dives per se, but I did a good job communicating the story and the history of 13 different ghosts. So I would definitely recommend checking that out on my Instagram. The next like physical location that I want to talk about is called the Lata Arcade. Um, and before arcades were video game spots, they were more like what we know now as food halls, where it's like a location, probably open, and it has a bunch of smaller shops in it. So that's what the Lata Arcade is. It's 2 stories. It's on like the busiest street in Uptown, and you like there's these open doors. On the left is a potbelly sandwich spot, is what it's called. It's like a chain down here. I don't know if you have it up there. And on the right is now Chipotle.
We do
um,
have those.
you're right, and then you go in, and there's this old fashioned shoe shiner. His name's Tony. He's been working there for 40 years. There are this limestone staircase up to the second floor, original limestones from when the building was built in 1914. Bottom floor, on the left and right, it goes straight forward with a hallway in the middle. And, there's a pizza place, a burger place, poke bowls, dumplings, empanadas, just like all this different stuff. There used to be a barber shop that was there for over 100 years, but they actually moved out last year because the landlord was a piece of shit. And I can say that because I used to work for him. But and then on the second floor, there's like office tenants, an architecture group that's been there for 40 plus years, which is wild to think about someone having an office there a lot long. A lawyer's office, a few other things. I used to be on the property management team of that building, um, which for me it was like Christmas, like I had this whole portfolio of buildings I managed, and then I was like, boom, got a haunted one. It's about damn time. So I go in there and immediately I start asking all of the tenants, like, this place is spooky as fuck. Like, what's happened to you? And a lot of them said the same thing: is if they were on the bottom floor, closing after hours, if they were there on the weekend by themselves, anything like that, they could hear footsteps walking in a circle on the second floor, um, while they know that no one's there. And then if they were on the second floor, same story, they would hear footsteps on their floor. A woman who was at a reception desk, she would say it would happen all the time where people were walking around her all the time. So she would like clock it as someone walking behind her, but then no one would be there. Like, she senses it. She has like an idea of where all the physical people are in the building, so when they walk by, it's no surprise. She senses someone right behind her. No one's there. Um, she doesn't believe in ghosts, but she told me that story. Um, so the porter, the guy who works there, like as the janitor keeps an eye on it. He's been there for a number of years. He has a name, it's the ghost Fred, which I think is just a very common name for a ghost. I've come across it a lot.
Fred, George. I think George is another
Yep,
big one.
I think those are just like friendly names.
Yeah.
It puts people at ease. Um, but he says like when he's there opening up shop at 6 o'clock by himself, he'll say good morning to Fred, and then good night to him when he's closing, and he won't have any issues. Um, last or 2 years ago, I was still working there. I did a a history and ghost hunt of the building. It was a fundraiser for a project I was working on, and he told me, he was like, happy to have you guys here, but do not piss Fred off because I'm going to be the one that has to deal with it. Then the spookiest thing that happened in the building, and it still gives me chills thinking about it, is on the second floor, a flower shop was opening up while I was working there. And so the woman who was opening up, she was the sole employee. She got the keys to the place and she started going every night to slowly move her stuff in and make the spruce the place up. And she said that she has felt like an oppressive, dark force just constantly over her shoulder in the room with her. And she said like a spiritual person, so she kind of understood what was happening. She tried to use like protection crystals, put stuff in the corners of the space, saged a bunch. Nothing was working. And then one night, she was almost ready to open up shop and she just felt it over her shoulder and she was like, man, enough. Like, I'm the owner of this shop now. I'm taking over it. I promise you, I will take care of this place. I will make sure that this is a good place for you to stay, but you gotta leave me alone. And when she said that, a glass of water on her desk cracked down the center. It stuck together, but it was like, cracked. And then when she picked up the glass, it was on a coaster, and underneath there, on the coaster, was a droplets of water in the shape of a smiley face. And she said that never been bothered since then.
That's yeah, no, I have if something like that happened to me, I would be going through all my scriptures. I would I would be I'd be praying it up in there, man. I don't I don't mess with that stuff. I've done my fair share of ghost hunting. I've had my fair share of paranormal experiences. When it gets to that point, it's go time.
It was no, it was good. It was the ghost saying like, "All right, I'll back off. Take care of my shop for me."
Yeah,
Um,
I guess, but you never know when it. Hopefully, she hasn't had any issues since.
she, not that I've heard of, no.
Oh,
Um,
that's good at least.
so when we did the ghost hunt as a fundraiser, that was one of the rooms that we were in there at night, and we had the spirit box, so it's going through the channels, saying random stuff, and the most clear thing that came out of the spirit box was a man's voice, and it said, "She won't listen to me." So. So
uh,
he's leaving her alone, but I guess he's still like, God, God damn it.
put put these in the corner. They'll sell so much better if they go over
Right.
here. Wow.
So I wonder what his shtick is, what he's trying to get her to do for him. Um,
Who
but
knows?
that's the Lata Arcade, built in 1914. It's still a really cool place. If you are in the Charlotte area and you're visiting uptown and you don't know where to go, that's the place to go. Because it'll bring you into the center of everything, and then also there's an awesome place, like awesome places to eat. Um, so like those are two solid stories we have. I can talk all night about them, but I'm not going to. Um, I'd love to talk about some Charlotte cryptids we
Let
have.
Let's get into it.
All right.
I love me some cryptids.
So my top three. Number one is the Lake Norman Monster. Now, Lake Norman itself, only part of it is in Mecklenburg County, but I count it as the area. Um, like I said before, the lands before we got here was Catawba. So the major river that was going through our area was called the Catawba River. And then in the 1950s and 60s, they started building dams along it to create hydroelectric power as well as make up lakes. So the whole, what is a few different towns, but mostly Mooresville, they created into Lake Norman, which was the largest man-made lake in North Carolina, not the country, but in North Carolina. I don't know if you've come across this yet, but like all of our lakes in America are man-made, like nearly all of them,
Yeah,
like tens of thousands of them.
most of the ones that aren't are up by me, like the Great Lakes, and
I mean, that's the exception. Like
yeah, but
we
everything
we
else,
couldn't make those.
everything else
Yeah,
is pretty much man-made.
literally. Yeah. So, it's not out of the ordinary for this to happen, but Lake Norman is one of those stories where we sank a town. Even if you're boating out today and you have one of those fancy radars that shows you what's underneath it, you'll see bridges and buses and church steeples and, the remnants of mills that were down there with like actual like, that big heavy metal equipment that they couldn't have moved because once you put it in place, it's there forever.
Yep.
So that stuff is at the bottom of the lake. I have found that there are 13 cemeteries that were there beforehand, that the city and Duke Energy claimed to have moved. There are certain cases where we at least know they moved the headstones, but we don't know if they moved the bodies.
Probably not.
And I mean, Lake Norman, we're talking like the coastline is over like 500 miles. It's a huge ass lake, and we're in North Carolina, we're in the South. There were a dozen, or probably not a dozen, but there were a handful of plantations that were in that area. And when you have a plantation, you have slave cemeteries that were unmarked, so they
Mhm.
wouldn't have known about those. Um, so those are for sure at the bottom of the lake. Now, here we are talking about the lake. Pretty much as soon as we got the lake, there started to be reports of sightings of something dark and mysterious. And in the late 80s, early 90s, start of the internet, pretty much, a guy who still lives here, he opens up LakeNormanMonster.com, a place for people to submit the stories of things that they've seen. Um, and there's like over 100 sightings at this point, as frequent as, the last one I saw was in the end of 2024, some months ago.
Mhm.
And people are claiming on seeing it. The story always varies, but the consensus is that it's a large serpent-like fish with a head that is reminiscent of that of a horse's and a very rugged dorsal fin. And if it were to brush up against you, it will leave a pretty intense rash, and it's actually known for taking bites out of people's flippers. If they're scuba diving or something like that, like people will have that taking bites out. Um, that's the story. So like, there's been different like news crews that have gone out there. Like at one point, a Japanese news crew that was like producing a show, they came out and they hired local fishermen to help them, and they had put like an entire rotisserie chicken on a hook, and they're dragging it. Boom, whole thing gone. Um, so something's down there. If you were to talk to Captain Gus, who was like a notorious riverboat captain,
Mhm.
take people on dinners, his story was that when the lake first opened up, some scientists from the like college nearby actually started up a fish farm, and they were crossbreeding catfish and like gar, just trying to get these big, beefy fish that they could sell at the markets. And then once they were, caught and accused of, being Frankenstein, they closed up shop and released everything that they had crossbred into the lake. And now here we are, generations later, seeing the results of these crossbred beefy fish. Um, there's also a nuclear power plant on the lake that actually uses the water of the lake to cool down its turbines. And if you go on the website for McGuire, you can see reports of when they have had leaks, and it is very frequent, like terrifyingly frequent, how often they are accidentally spilling stuff into the lake.
And
Um, I mean, but there's always issues. The same with sewage. Like, there's always sewage spills that always like magically clear away right before the 4th of July.
oh,
And
yep.
so a lot of shit is going on in this lake. And like I said, even the Catawba tribe, they had stories of river monsters, um, like river monsters, and that's where like the mythology of like the long fish with the like a horse-like head came from, was a story that they were telling. Um, if you were to ask me what the Lake Norman monster is, I would say that it's probably just a regular fish described by someone who has never seen regular fish. Because, like, do you fish at all? Like, you're
Oh
familiar?
yeah. Yes. The whole time you were saying this, I'm thinking, all right, it's some type of gar or
Gar, yeah.
genetically modified gar, like the horse kind of face.
The,
Especially if
the
you're mixing them with
description.
catfish. Yeah, especially if you're mixing them with a catfish, so he gets like that real like that nasty but like kind of like pug nose instead of having the long gar beak. I could see it being something like that. Our
Hmm.
scientists are pretty
And, like,
wild.
and they can get big.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
especially in a man-made lake where they were introduced and it's not a real natural ecosystem. Like someone's gonna rise to the top and stay there for a very long time.
Yes.
Um, so I think it's a mixture of that. And then I think it's a mixture of just people being like paranoid about the lake because it's like it's unnatural. It's a man-made lake. It's not supposed to be there. And then like who's to say that nature's not gonna throw a rock into the pool just to fuck shit up?
Exactly.
Be, you know? So I think it's just like people's paranoia towards the lake. And I'm sure this is the same with a lot of similar lakes, but like the death count is terrifying. Um, Drunk people get on boats and do stupid shit, and it's in the summer. It's like every 3 days, someone someone drops and doesn't come back up.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah. There's a big I think it's Memorial Day weekend up in
mhm,
Michigan on Lake St. Clair. They have this giant event. It's called the Jobby Nooner.
mhm,
Everybody, it's on like a Thursday. Everybody leaves work halfway through the day on Thursday, gets on their boats out in this middle of this lake near this giant sandbar, ties hundreds of boats together, and everybody gets pissed drunk and jumps
mhm.
from boat to boat. There's fights and stuff like that. Numerous people die in this area every single
Yep.
year, and they still keep on doing
Yeah.
it.
And what's terrifying about that is like it's happening around you, and no one knows until people start like asking where their friends are. You know,
Yeah.
it's it's spooky.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
Last note on that before I go on to the next one is our police department actually utilize psychics when they cannot find a missing person in the lake. And I met a psychic medium. His name is Ed, and he was contracted by the police one time, and he found the person. In this case, it was actually a suicide. It wasn't like an accident or anything, but the person went out onto the lake with the intention of not coming back. And when the family reported it, police couldn't find anything. They put their drones down there, the little like submarines with the cameras. They had divers, couldn't find anything. Fucking psychic medium Ed goes out there on a boat, and they find him same weekend. So crazy.
Yeah.
All right. So on that depressing note, the second one I'll mention, but I won't talk about too much. Is the Wampus Cat.
Oh yeah.
You're familiar?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. The very interesting. So there's so much to it, though. You could do a whole episode on the Wampus Cat.
Oh, for sure. And my wife and I, we did when we had our podcast, the Old North State. Um, Now the thing about the Wampus is it's more Appalachian, you know.
Mhm.
Um, but there were like newspaper articles of sightings in our area back in the early 1900s. Now the thing is that what I found is the for us, and I'm guessing in like the North Carolina region, we kind of used Wampus as a you don't know what it is. It's a Wampus, like not necessarily the six-legged cat
Mhm.
like creature that kind of everyone else has kind of agreed upon. For us, you didn't know what it was Wampus. And I had found two stories for this area. One was they described a Wampus sighting, and what they ended up describing was a like 8 foot tall man covered in hair sitting at a picnic bench. That's their Wampus. So for me, I'm like, well, that sounds like Bigfoot. Take it a step further, I'm like, wait, I've seen bears sit at picnic benches before, you
Mhm.
know, like, so I wonder if it was something like that. Um, the second sighting was it was reported by a sheriff where it was a mountain cat, and he chased it underneath a house, put a branch in there. The branch was like ripped to shreds, and then he said he unloaded his six shooter underneath the house, and then they couldn't find anything after that. So it either escaped or disappeared. But that is the Wampus cat that he was describing. Now, I always tell people our region was filled with mountain cats,
Mhm.
cougars, mountain lions, panthers. East of Bladenboro is our area, which was like a very popular cryptid, the vampire beast of Bladenboro. So North Carolina was known for having that type of animal. Um, Extinct now, or endangered, sorry. Um, we did our part on that. But so for me, same thing like him, or Lake Norman. I think the Wampus kind of became a popular cryptid because it was people who probably had only seen a mountain lion once or twice in their life. Um, but then they come face to face with it, and those things are freaky looking, you know? Especially when they like a lot of them can get discolored, like there can be black ones. And with those like ears that spike straight up, and when they're hissing and growling at you, it's yeah,
Yeah,
freaky
yeah.
stuff.
Easy to misidentify or see something completely different than what it actually is.
Yeah. Now the last one that I'll tell you, and I can't explain it, is the weirdest thing. It's not new, but I had never heard it before. But there is a friend of mine has a podcast, and during COVID, or at the end of COVID, she was doing like live shows at a local market, where she'd be in there with a microphone recording, but have an audience, and she would bring guests on. And one of the times I went to her recording, and she had two different guys on. One was like a teacher but a motivational speaker. The other one was an artist. Two guys couldn't be more different, and they've also never met before. And one spoke, and then the other one spoke. But whenever Katie interviews someone, she always ends it with, "Have you ever experienced anything like weird or unusual that you can't explain?" And the rest of the interview, she's like, "How did you get to start in your career? What type of pop culture are you into?" And then she ends it with something weird. It's not like a paranormal podcast or anything. And the first guy, he was like, "Yeah, I'm not sure, but actually something comes to mind." A few years ago in the Starmont neighborhood of South End, which is Charlotte, and him and his friends were in a car. They were smoking, and they were driving down the street, and they see a cat, black cat, walk in the middle of the road. And they're looking at it. It won't move, and they're trying to get by, but they don't want to disturb it. It won't move, so they start like slowly getting closer and closer. Honk the horn. The thing pounces up, sprouts wings, and starts clawing at the windshield of their car. And as it got closer, they're like, "That's not a cat, that's an owl." But when they saw it in the middle of the road, four legs, tail stuck up in the air, it was a cat. And now here they are, honk their horn. The thing turns into an owl and starts attacking their car. Um, like I said, the witnesses were under the impression of, are under the influence of drugs. So take that with what you will. But the crazy part is that the next interviewed guest, like I said, he was an artist, completely different guy, was not friends with that first speaker. And when Katie asked the question, "Have you experienced anything unusual?" He was like, "I hadn't thought about this in years, but when that guy brought up his story, or reminded me of when I was walking through the metropolitan area of Charlotte, um, middle of the night, went for an insomnia walk, and along a construction site there was a chain link fence, and he saw an owl on it, staring at him, like just staring at him down, doing the whole like owl, following you with your neck."
Uh-huh.
And he was like, "Man, that's a weird looking owl." So he got up closer to it, and as soon as he did, the thing got on four legs, tail shot up in the back, and then the cat started walking along the fence with him. Yep. So here we are, two random strangers, and I'm at a random podcast recording, and both of them have had experiences in Charlotte with a cat owl shape shifting hybrid. So I'm like, I'm here at the right time, like I'm the spooky guy, like, instantly I put it on the internet, and I'm like, has anyone else experienced this? And it got popular on TikTok, and a lot of people in the Appalachian area were like, "Yeah, like shape shifting critters are something that we deal with all the time." Um, but I brought it to, I'm not sure if you come across him, Greg Fedora.
Oh,
Have you been?
I
That's
love
that's
Greg.
how I know you. Okay.
I love Greg. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So he's my guy. I brought this to him. I'm like, "Have you heard of anything like this?" A week and a half later, he was like, "Hey." there is a Cherokee legend of a cat owl shape-shifting hybrid, and it's called the Wessawahuhi. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna keep calling it the Charlotte Cat Owl, but I like that you know that name, you know?
I could not
um,
remember that to save my life.
exactly. Yeah, that's not gonna be put on a t-shirt anytime soon.
No.
Um,
You can try.
so it's crazy. Like, we're storytellers, and a lot of times our work is done for us. We just have to, take up something old. But in this case, there was something brand spanking new, that did have like a historical foundation already, I guess. And I love telling this story because I'm waiting for my third person where, I put this out there and someone's like, actually I got attacked by a cat that turned into an owl back then or whatever. Um, and when that happens, I will be sure to put that all over the internet.
I can't wait to see it. Oh,
Yeah. All right. So we're coming up to that hour mark.
yeah. Why don't you tell?
My closing statement for Charlotte. I want to. I like to brag about one thing that I've done, just so you know about the context of what I do. There was a headstone in Elmwood Cemetery, which is the largest cemetery in Charlotte. It was for Charlie Hawk, and his description is Charlie Hawk, age 65, killed by a lion. Right? So, Charlotte, North Carolina, guy was killed by a lion. And in that headstone, I felt like, I came across it one day. I visit Elmwood all the time. I'm part of the board now of directors for the cemetery. Um, so like I actually get to be a decision maker for, capital projects that we do, and we're always doing fundraising stuff and cool events. But I found this headstone, and a few months later I visited it, and it was broken substantially into like big chunks. So for the next 2 years, I spent a good chunk of time researching Charlie, but then also fundraising to have his headstone restored, and put back onto a secure base. And as of October 2024, last year, it's up and standing. I raised the $3,500. And one of my fundraising events was that Lata Arcade history and ghost hunt tour that actually paid for half of it. Um, and it's up and standing. So now historic preservation is something that I'm taking pretty seriously. Trying to do my part and get involved. Like I said, us young people, it's up to us in the future. But we're not alone. Like there are good people out there already doing the work. We just got to get connected.
Yeah.
Um, so that's my call of action. If you're out there and like you're curious about, cemeteries, just start spending time in there. Learn how to clean them. There's 1.5 million YouTube videos, and I post about it on my Instagram a lot on how to do it safely. Um, get out there, do it. Start saving your old buildings. Um, advocating for stuff like that, and then also just learning your local history. Because if you like ghost stories, if you're into the paranormal, you like history, whether you know it or not yet.
Yes.
Um, and then once you start learning that stuff, you're gonna find you'll find rabbit holes in the most mundane towns ever.
Hmm.
You'll find the coolest shit in like the town where you grew up in. You're like, man, there's nothing to do here. There's only one stoplight, And then the next thing you find out is that there's like a nuclear bomb bunker 300 miles underneath the mall. Something weird like that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so go out there, get interested in the spooky stuff, and if you find Bigfoot, don't tell anyone.
Yeah. Well, tell me. And
Tell people like us, but don't go to the cops.
yeah,
It's
no,
not
no.
gonna it's not gonna end well.
No, you're gonna have black vehicles pulling up to your vehicle, telling you if you tell people like us, you know,
Yeah,
I'll
they'll shine the light in your eyes, and the next thing you know, you'll be fucking drinking out of a straw.
oh,
All right, that's my spiel about Charlotte, North Carolina. Is there anything that you want to know?
oh, I, I can already tell I'm gonna have you back on here in the future. I know you got so much more that we could sit here and talk about, but well, we can arrange that. Actually, I would like to next time have my buddy Oren also here because he's
I
from
know Oren. I've been on his podcast too.
Oh, was yeah him and Shane?
Yep, him and Shane.
Oh yeah, we all part of Open Minds Media. They're my brothers.
Orange, North Carolina.
Yeah, yep. He's
Yeah,
out Raleigh.
Raleigh. Yeah, he knows what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
but why don't you tell everybody where they can find you one last time, and all this stuff will be in the description below. Seriously, guys, check
Yeah.
them out.
At Spooky CLT on Instagram, spookyclt.com. I had a TikTok, but I don't know what's the deal with that anymore. I deleted it when I thought it was banned, and now I haven't re-downloaded it since. And then Old North State Podcast is still up and running, even though we haven't recorded since our kiddo came along. But that's North Carolina history, and then there are a lot of ghost stories and specifically Charlotte stuff as well. But that's where to find me, and I hope you do.
All right, guys. Well, that's it for this week. And we'll be back again with a double drop next week. This episode, and then a super special Easter themed episodes coming out for you guys with some friends of the show. So get ready for the double drop of Mythos next week. And with that being said, God bless each and every one of you, and find your piece of the puzzle. Because we're all building this puzzle, and we all got to pick our piece up and fit it in. And with that being said, see y'all next week. Bye, y'all.